They thought she was an easy target, just a disabled black girl rolling into the Ridgewood cafeteria, too quiet to fight back, too broken to matter. The bullies laughed, mocked, and dragged her across the floor like she was invisible. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. She wasn't alone, because the moment they touched her, the door didn't just open. It exploded, and her father, a federal agent trained to hunt violent criminals, walked in with fire in his eyes. The Ridgewood High cafeteria was always loud at 11:45 a.m., a chaotic ocean of slamming trays, scraping chairs, and 100 different conversations colliding in the air. But the moment Ariel Johnson rolled through the doorway, the noise didn't fade. It stalled. Like the whole room had swallowed its voice for half a second. Ariel felt it instantly, the sharp shift, the sudden stiffness in the air. It wasn't new. This was her third week at Ridgewood, and every day felt like stepping onto a stage she never auditioned for. She pushed her wheelchair forward, hands trembling slightly on the rims, trying to make herself smaller, even though she couldn't physically go anywhere but forward. Her hoodie sleeve slipped down as she moved, revealing the medical brace on her wrist. The whispers sharpened. "Here comes the crippled girl again." And quote, "Look at her. Seriously, why is she even here?" I swear she slows down the whole hallway. Ariel kept her eyes down. If she didn't make eye contact, maybe their words wouldn't land as deep. Maybe. But Ridgewood had a way of making sure insults hit with full force. A cluster of girls at the left table giggled while pretending to hide behind their textbooks. A group of boys wearing matching gold and navy jackets, baseball players, snickered openly, not even bothering to disguise their amusement. One voice, sharp and deliberately loud, cut across the room. "Black cripple rolling through." A few heads snapped toward the source. A few others pretended not to hear, but no one spoke up. Not a single person said, "Cut it out," or "That's messed up," or even looked uncomfortable enough to show they disagreed. This was Ridgewood. Shiny trophies, clean hallways, and rot hidden under every fluorescent light. Ariel forced herself to keep moving. She wanted to eat quickly, quietly, and disappear before anyone had the chance to notice her. But that hope was already gone the moment she entered. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, too loud, too fast. She blinked hard, swallowing the burn of tears climbing up her throat. She refused to let them see her cry. Crying would only feed them. Crying would make them bold. She reached the middle of the cafeteria, weaving through tables, navigating dropped backpacks and abandoned food trays like obstacles designed to trip her. A boy purposely stretched his leg out, pretending not to notice her, forcing her to break suddenly. "She almost hit me," he muttered, with a dramatic scoff. His friends laughed. Ariel inhaled shakily and rolled past him without a word. She had gotten good at pretending she didn't hear anything, good at building a wall between her expression and her emotions. But today, her wall felt thinner, cracked around the edges. Her stomach was tight, her fingers numb from gripping the wheels. She just needed to get to one empty table, just one safe corner where she could breathe for 5 minutes. But her mind kept replaying the whispers, the laughter, the stares. Every inch of this place told her she didn't belong, not because she used a wheelchair, not because she was quiet, but because of the color of her skin. Ridgewood was polished, prestigious, and painfully predictable. As she approached a small, empty table near the back, the cafeteria doors swung open loud, dramatic, like someone had kicked them from the outside. Conversations restarted for a moment, then shifted again into uneasy murmurs. A burst of orange jackets entered the room. The baseball team. The ones everyone avoided. The ones who never faced consequences. The ones who smiled like they owned the school. At the front of the group was the unmistakable figure of Brandon Cole, the crown prince of Ridgewood's entitlement, walking with the swagger of someone who had never heard the word no in his life. His eyes scanned the room lazily until they landed on Ariel, and his smirk sharpened. Ariel didn't know it yet, but the next few minutes would be the most terrifying of her life, minutes that would end with someone kicking down the cafeteria door for real. She adjusted her grip on the wheels, unaware that the storm in orange jackets had already chosen its target and was heading straight toward her. Brandon Cole spotted Ariel before she even realized the cafeteria doors had closed behind him. 1 second he was laughing loudly with Mason and Tyler. The next his gaze locked onto the girl in the wheelchair sitting alone near the back. His grin shifted lazy at first, then curling into something sharp, cruel, and hungry. "Yo!" Brandon murmured, elbowing Mason as he tilted his chin toward Ariel. "Look what we've got today," Mason snorted. "Breakfast, lunch, and entertainment." Tyler cracked his knuckles. "Let's say hi." The three of them peeled away from the crowd, moving in unison like a pack that had just found a wounded animal. The cafeteria's ambient chatter dipped again, not fully silent, but expectant like everyone sensed trouble coming and chose to sit back and watch. Ariel saw them too late. She froze with a carton of chocolate milk still unopened beside her tray. Her fingers twitched on the wheelchair rims, but she didn't move, couldn't. She knew that look in Brandon's eyes. She'd seen it on dogs about to pounce, and on boys who thought hurting someone weaker made them powerful. Brandon reached her table first, leaning down with his palms flat on the surface, blocking her view of everything except his smirking face. "Well, well, if it isn't Ridgewood's little speed bump," he said, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "How's the ride today? Still rolling slow?" Mason and Tyler erupted in laughter as if Brandon had just delivered a perfect punchline. Tyler added, "Bet she's got turbo mode. Look at her, practically a NASCAR." Ariel swallowed hard. Her throat burned. She kept her voice locked inside, tucked behind her teeth, because she already knew that talking only made things worse. They weren't here for conversation. They were here for sport. Brandon circled behind her wheelchair like a shark, inspecting prey. "You know," he said casually, "it's kind of cute how you try to act tough, rolling in like you belong here." He tapped the back of her chair with 2 fingers. "But we all know you don't." A few students nearby glanced over, then away even faster. Fear, apathy, self-preservation. They blended together in Ridgewood like cafeteria ketchup smeared on stainless steel, always there, never cleaned. Mason stepped closer, leaning so near Ariel could smell the artificial grape drink on his breath. "You're quiet today," he mocked. "Did someone forget to charge your batteries?" Tyler laughed so loudly a teacher at the far corner gave them a disapproving look and then immediately pretended she hadn't seen anything when Brandon met her eyes. Ariel tightened her hands on the rims of her wheelchair. She wanted to disappear, melt into the floor, but the cafeteria floor was cold, real, and merciless. Brandon's gaze drifted downward. He noticed something near her hand, something dangling from her backpack zipper. A small black keychain with bold white letters, FBI. Brandon lifted it with 2 fingers like a dirty object he'd found on the ground. "Oh?" His grin widened. "What's this? You cosplaying now?" He dangled the keychain in front of her face before laughing. "Don't tell me your daddy's FBI. That would be hilarious." Mason hooted. Tyler slapped the table. Ariel's breath hitched. She wished more than anything for the strength to lie. To say, "It's fake," but fear locked her jaw shut. Brandon noticed the flicker in her eyes, and his smile sharpened into something predatory. "Hold up," he said, lowering his voice. "You're not saying he actually is." He leaned closer, until Ariel could smell the mint gum he was chewing. "Seriously? Daddy's a Fed?" He laughed, loud and sharp, drawing more eyes. "Oh, this is rich. Daddy FBI. What's he gonna do, arrest us for bullying you?" Mason chimed in. "Maybe he'll interrogate us, waterboard us with cafeteria soup." Tyler pretended to raise his hands. "Oh no! Agent Daddy is coming for me!" The cafeteria roared with second-hand laughter. But the air shifted. Not for them. For Ariel. Her shoulders stiffened. Her eyes shimmered with a mixture of fear, humiliation, and something else dangerous, trembling, silent desperation. Brandon leaned back, satisfied with himself. No one in that cafeteria understood that Brandon's little joke, his careless, stupid laugh, would become the spark that burned down the rest of his perfect world. Smirking, Brandon tapped the back of Ariel's wheelchair again and said, "Let's see how much pressure it takes before Princess cracks." Then, he nodded to Mason and Tyler, signaling the start of something far worse. The cafeteria reached its loudest point of the day, chairs scraping, trays clattering, voices rising over one another, yet somehow Ariel felt like she was trapped inside a soundproof box. Every noise seemed muffled except the thundering footsteps approaching behind her. Brandon moved first. He circled behind Ariel's wheelchair without warning, the way a bored child might walk around a toy they were planning to break. His shadow spilled over her shoulders, swallowing the last sliver of comfort she had. Before Ariel could even turn her head, Brandon shoved the back of her wheelchair forward hard. Her breath caught. Her hands slipped. The wheels lurched. Her body pitched forward so violently, she nearly tumbled out. Gasps rippled across the cafeteria. Her tray rattled and slid, milk splashing across the table. "Oh man, careful!" Brandon laughed, giving the chair another light tap like it was some malfunctioning shopping cart. "These things don't come with brakes?" Mason and Tyler wasted no time joining the performance. Mason hunched over, dragging one leg behind him exaggeratingly as he limped in circles around Ariel. "Look at me," he moaned loudly, slurring his words. "I'm Ariel. Every hallway is an obstacle course." Tyler fell into a fake limp beside him. Bro, don't steal my act. I'm the original disabled queen," a few students snorted. Others winced. Some lifted their phones. The red recording lights blinked like tiny, cruel eyes. Ariel gripped the rims of her wheelchair so tightly her fingers hurt. She wasn't sure if her shaking came from fear, anger, or humiliation, maybe all of them at once. She kept her gaze fixed on the table, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. But Brandon wasn't finished, not even close. He stepped closer, placing his hand firmly on the handle of her wheelchair. "You know," he murmured, voice low enough for only the nearest students to hear, "I'm starting to think you're only here to make us look better. I mean, someone has to be at the bottom, right?" Mason chuckled. "She's like a prop the school hired." Tyler added, "Yeah, like background scenery. Sad scenery." And then it happened so fast Ariel didn't have time to brace. Brandon ripped the wheelchair backward, hard. Ariel's body jerked with it, but her smaller frame didn't stay balanced. Her hand slipped from the rim. Her center of gravity shifted. Her body slid off the seat, and she fell. Her shoulder slammed first, then her elbow. Then her cheek hit the cold cafeteria floor with a muted thud. The sound echoed in the silence that followed. Silence so deep it felt like the entire room had stopped breathing. Gasps burst across the tables. Phones were raised higher. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Ariel lay on the tile, stunned, pain flaring up her side. Her limbs felt scattered, foreign, uncooperative. She tried to push herself up, but her arm trembled and gave out. Her wheelchair, her lifeline, her freedom was no longer beside her. Brandon had shoved it several feet away, where it now spun lazily before stopping near a cluster of tables. He didn't even glance at the wheelchair. His attention was fixed entirely on Ariel. He crouched slightly, tilting his head like a hunter observing whether its prey was still alive. "You want it back?" he asked softly, almost sweetly. Ariel's breath came out in uneven shivers. Her cheeks stung. Her legs lay limp behind her. Everything inside her screamed to crawl away, but she couldn't. She couldn't. Brandon leaned closer, smile turning razor-sharp. "Then crawl," he hissed. "Crawl if you want it." A ripple of horror passed through the cafeteria, but no one moved. Not a single student stepped forward. Not a single teacher intervened. Ariel's palms pressed against the floor, shaking uncontrollably. She lay there, small, helpless, trembling while dozens of eyes watched, filmed, whispered. And yet, not one person dared to cross the invisible line of fear that Brandon ruled over. Above her, Brandon straightened up, smirking as he nudged her foot with his shoe. The real torment, the one he had been waiting to unleash, was only just beginning. Ariel barely had time to gasp before a rough hand clamped around her ankle. Her entire body jolted. Brandon Cole didn't hesitate, not for a second, not for a flicker of remorse. He tightened his grip and yanked. Ariel slid across the cafeteria floor, her palms scraping against the cold tile, as a sharp cry tore out of her throat. "Stop!" Her voice cracked mid-scream. But Brandon didn't stop. He pulled harder, her body dragged helplessly behind him, her arms flailing, her backpack catching twice on the tile before snapping loose. Her cheek burned from the friction. Her hair fanned across the dirty floor like spilled ink. Gasps erupted around them. Chairs screeched as students jumped up. A few hands flew to mouths. But none of that mattered to Brandon. He was laughing loud, triumphant, fueled by the adrenaline of domination. "Come on, Ariel!" he shouted mockingly. "You wanted your chair? Come get it!" He dragged her another few feet, ignoring the high-pitched pleas coming out of her in broken syllables. "Please let go." Her voice trembled so hard the words barely formed. Mason pumped his fist in the air like they were at a pep rally. Tyler filmed from two angles, cackling. All around them, students crowded in a loose circle, phones raised high. The red recording lights blinked like hundreds of tiny predators waiting to feast. Someone murmured, "Oh my God, she's hurt." Another whispered, "Should we stop him?" A third person hissed back, "Are you crazy? That's Brandon. You interfere, you're next." So no one moved. No one stepped forward. It was easier, safer to watch. Even the ones whose faces twisted with guilt stayed rooted to the spot. Silent spectators in a theater of cruelty. Ariel clawed at the floor, her nails scraping helplessly, trying to slow herself down. But Brandon was stronger. He jerked her again, dragging her legs sideways until her shoes nearly slipped off. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. Her heartbeat hammered against her ribs. Tears blurred her vision. Everything hurt. Everything. Yet the laughter around her was louder than any pain. "Look at her face!" Mason shouted. "She's crying like a baby." Tyler zoomed in with his phone. "This is gold, man. Pure gold." Ariel squeezed her eyes shut, humiliation crashing over her in waves so thick she could barely breathe. Her whole world had shrunk to one nightmare moment, being dragged like trash in front of an audience that found it entertaining. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. Not loud, not strong, but terrified. "Stop it! Brandon, stop!" It belonged to Ezra Patel, a quiet sophomore who usually blended into the background. His hands shook so violently he nearly dropped his phone. He glanced from Ariel's broken form on the floor to Brandon's hand still locked around her ankle. He knew he couldn't fight Brandon, but he could do something else. Ezra backed away from the circle, heart pounding, and ducked behind a vending machine. He fumbled with his phone, fingers trembling so badly he misdialed twice before finally hitting the right contact. Special Agent Marcus Johnson, Ariel's father. Ezra pressed the phone to his ear as Brandon dragged Ariel another few inches across the floor. "Please pick up. Please pick up," he whispered, voice cracking. On the third ring, someone answered. "Johnson." Ezra swallowed, his chest tightening. "Sir, this is Ezra. I'm at Ridgewood High." Marcus's tone sharpened instantly. "Are you with Ariel?" Ezra squeezed his eyes shut as another scream echoed behind him. "They're hurting her, sir. Brandon and his friends, they're dragging her on the floor." A sharp silence. Cold. Deadly. Ezra forced the words out quickly, breathless. "You need to come. Now. Please come now." Marcus's voice dropped to a level Ezra had never heard before. "Where is my daughter?" Ezra's throat tightened. "Cafeteria. They're still doing it." A beat. Then Marcus said just 3 words, calm, lethal, final. "I'm on my way. Aldo." Ezra lowered the phone slowly, his hands still shaking as he whispered to himself, "God help them." He peeked around the corner just as Ariel's body slid another foot, Brandon's laughter booming, completely unaware of the storm that had just been set in motion. And at that exact moment, far across the campus, The cafeteria doors stood waiting, about to be blown open by a fury Ridgewood High had never seen before. At the far end of the cafeteria, perched behind the long wooden supervision desk, Miss Riley Watson sat with her laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting off her glasses. She had full, unobstructed view of everything happening in the center of the room. Ariel dragging across the floor, Brandon's hand locked around her ankle, Mason and Tyler laughing like hyenas. And she saw it all, every scream, every yank, every humiliating inch. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flickered, her spine straightened for a split second, but then, deliberately, she lowered her gaze and clicked open her email inbox. Ariel's choked cry echoed across the cafeteria. Miss Riley's fingers hovered above the keyboard. She hesitated, just for a breath, just long enough for her conscience to flare. Then she clicked a random email and pretended to read. Behind her, another teacher, Mr. Feldman, standing near the wall with a clipboard shifted uncomfortably. He kept glancing between the students and the door, like he was silently debating if he should intervene. "Riley," he whispered harshly, "are you seriously going to ignore that?" Miss Riley didn't look up. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" he hissed. "She's being dragged across the floor." Miss Riley closed her eyes as if that would make the situation disappear. "Brandon's father, he's the school's principal donor, annual fund, athletics budget, the new science wing, everything." Mr. Feldman's voice dropped to a tense, frightened whisper. "So we're just going to let him assault her because of a check?" Miss Riley kept her eyes glued to her screen. "You don't understand. People who go against the coals don't last long here." Her words trembled with the kind of fear that came from experience warnings, rumors, job insecurity. Ridgewood High, beneath its polished surface, was ruled not by fairness or decency, but by wealthy families who bought silence and obedience. "Besides," she added, voice barely audible, "intervening will only make it worse for her later." Mr. Feldman stared at her, horrified, disgusted but also trapped. He knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Brandon had a reputation for retaliation, for making lives miserable, for going after teachers who embarrassed him. Still, the reality was brutal. A child was being hurt, and the adults chose fear over action. Another scream from the center of the cafeteria sliced through the tension. Miss Riley flinched. Mr. Feldman swallowed hard, guilt tightening around his chest like a vice. "We're supposed to protect them," he whispered. "We're supposed to keep our jobs." Miss Riley snapped back, finally looking up. Her face was pale, her eyes strained. "I'm not risking mine for a girl whose father isn't." She froze mid-sentence. Her eyes flicked upward. Right above her desk, nestled discreetly in the corner, was a security camera, its lens angled perfectly toward the scene unfolding in the middle of the cafeteria, recording, watching, capturing everything. Not just the bullying, but the adult's cowardice. Neither she nor Mr. Feldman had noticed it until now. Her hands went cold, her breath stalled. "That camera," Mr. Feldman whispered. "It saw everything." Miss Riley felt her stomach drop. "Oh, God!" Ariel screamed again, louder this time, raw and desperate, as Brandon dragged her in another harsh jerk, pulling her several more feet across the floor. Students gasped, phones recorded. No one stepped in, and the teachers, those who were meant to shield her, stood frozen in their own fear. While the adults stayed silent, Ariel's body slid across another stretch of cold tile, her cries growing weaker as Brandon's grip tightened. And above them all, the camera blinked, silently storing the evidence that would soon explode like a grenade in Ridgewood High. Far across the campus, heavy footsteps marched with controlled fury, steps belonging to a man who did not hesitate, did not fear, and did not forgive. Brandon's time was nearly up. The cafeteria doors didn't simply open, they exploded inward. A thunderous bang ricocheted off every wall, slicing through the air sharper than any scream, sharper than any laughter that had filled the room moments before. The sound was so violent that half the students jumped in their seats. A tray clattered to the floor somewhere, A milk carton burst under someone's shoe. And then, silence. Real silence. The kind that drops like a guillotine. Standing in the doorway, framed by the harsh fluorescent lights behind him, was Special Agent Marcus Johnson. He wasn't just tall, he towered. His presence hit the room like a shockwave. His black FBI windbreaker stretched across broad shoulders, the bold yellow letters stark and unmistakable. His jaw was clenched tight enough to crack bone. His eyes, usually warm, patient, were now two cold, blazing coals locked on one thing: his daughter, Ariel. On the floor, trembling, bruised, dragged. Marcus didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't speak. He just stared, and his stare burned hotter than fire. Brandon was the first to react. His grin collapsed. His color drained. His hand dropped Ariel's ankle as if it had suddenly turned to molten metal. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over Mason's foot. "Wait," Mason stammered. "Who is that?" Tyler's phone slipped from his hand and shattered on the tile. The student standing closest to the center stepped back instinctively, forming a wider circle, parting the crowd like the Red Sea as Marcus began to walk forward with slow, terrifying precision. Every step echoed, deliberate, deadly, controlled, but barely, because underneath that calm stride was a man holding himself together by a single thread. A father, a protector, a trained weapon. Ariel lifted her head weakly, eyes swollen with tears. When she saw him, a tiny, broken gasp escaped her lips. "Dad." That sound small, trembling, wounded ignited something nuclear inside Marcus's chest. He hadn't moved fast enough. He hadn't protected her. And someone was going to pay for that. Brandon swallowed hard. "Hey, this is a misunderstanding." Marcus didn't even look at him. Not yet. He reached Ariel first. He kneeled beside her. Movements gentle, so achingly gentle, it contrasted violently with the energy radiating off him. He cupped the back of her head, lifting her carefully, examining the red marks on her cheek, the scrapes on her arms, the bruising near her wrist. Ariel's hand trembled as she clutched his sleeve. I fell," she whispered, voice cracking under the weight of fear and humiliation. Marcus didn't correct her. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He had seen enough. Behind him, Brandon's voice shook. "Look, sir, I didn't mean." Marcus stood, slowly, and now he looked at Brandon, not like one looks at a student, or a bully, or even a criminal. Marcus looked at him the way a trained federal agent looks at a threat. The air tightened. Students held their breaths. A girl near the back wiped tears from her eyes, not sure if she was terrified or relieved. Marcus wasn't just any FBI agent. He was a special agent with the Youth Violent Crimes Division, a man whose entire career revolved around catching violent offenders, interrogating gang leaders, and dealing with the worst of humanity before they turned 18. People like Brandon were not new to him. They were his specialty. His voice, when it finally came, was low enough to freeze blood. "Who put their hands on my daughter?" The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Its weight thundered through the cafeteria harder than the door slam. Brandon's lips parted uselessly, but no sound came out. Mason looked ready to faint. Tyler looked ready to run. Dozens of students stepped further back, giving Marcus more room, as if instinct warned them he needed space to unleash whatever storm he carried. And then another shadow filled the doorway behind him. The cafeteria turned its attention to the newcomer, Officer Grant, the school resource officer, red-faced, panting, one hand gripping his holster, the other steadying himself. He had gotten Marcus's frantic call. He had heard the tremor in the agent's voice. He knew this wasn't going to be a routine intervention. He looked from Marcus to Ariel to Brandon, and his expression hardened instantly. The storm wasn't coming. It had arrived. Marcus's gaze didn't leave Brandon as he repeated, each word colder than the last. "I asked you a question. Who touched my child?" And with Officer Grant stepping fully into the cafeteria, it became painfully clear. Brandon's reign of fear was seconds away from collapsing completely, violently, and publicly. The cafeteria was no longer a cafeteria. It had become an arena, 200 students forming a trembling circle, phones raised, breaths held, eyes wide. A ring of silent spectators witnessing the moment Ridgewood High's untouchable hierarchy finally cracked. At the center of it all, a bruised girl, a furious father, 3 collapsing bullies, and a school officer who suddenly realized he had walked into the middle of a storm. Marcus kept one arm around Ariel, lifting her with the same care someone would give a fragile piece of glass, except Ariel wasn't fragile. She was just hurt, bruised, humiliated, and betrayed by everyone who should have kept her safe. Her fingers tightened on her father's jacket. Her breaths came fast and uneven. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks, dripping onto Marcus's sleeve. Marcus brushed a thumb under her eye, gentle, trembling with the effort to stay calm. Then he turned. His entire expression changed. Gone was the softness. Gone was the fatherly concern. What replaced it was something colder, sharper, the professional mercilessness of a federal agent who had seen too much violence, too many victims, and far too many predators who thought they'd never be caught. Brandon took a shaky step back, bumping into Tyler. Officer Grant stepped forward, clearing his throat and trying to maintain his authority, though his eyes flickered nervously between Marcus and the boys. "Sir," Grant said carefully, "I need to know what happened here." Marcus didn't look away from Brandon. "Ask her," he said, his voice low, controlled like a blade, being sheathed dangerous even when restrained. Grant nodded and crouched slightly, so he could see Ariel's face. "Ariel," he said softly, "did they do this? Did they make you fall?" Ariel's chin quivered. Her eyes shifted briefly to Brandon, who stared back with a look that dared no, threatened her to speak. For a moment, the cafeteria held its breath, and then she nodded. A small, trembling, devastating nod. Tears slid down her jawline. Officer Grant exhaled sharply. "Okay, thank you, sweetheart." Behind him, Mason whispered, "We're screwed," voice barely audible. Brandon's chest heaved, sweat gathering at his hairline, but still he tried to salvage control. He stepped forward, attempting to put confidence back into his voice even as it cracked like thin ice. "Look, she's lying," Brandon insisted. "I didn't even touch her. She fell on her own. People slip all the time. Floors are wet or whatever." A pathetic murmur of agreement came from Tyler. "Yeah, she just fell." Marcus laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It wasn't even a sarcastic one. It was a quiet, chilling, I know you're done kind of laugh that made the hairs on the back of every neck in the room stand up. He took one step forward, and Brandon flinched. "You dragged her," Marcus said calmly, "across the floor, by her leg." While she screamed, Brandon's face drained. "No, I didn't touch." But Marcus didn't need to argue, not anymore. Because suddenly, from the back of the cafeteria, a voice shouted, "I got it on camera!" Everyone turned. A sophomore girl held up her phone. Then another voice. "I recorded it too." Then another. "So did I." And another. And another. Dozens of students raised their phones, each one glowing with proof. Evidence. The truth, from angles Brandon hadn't even realized he was being watched from. 12 different perspectives. 12 different videos. 12 simultaneous death sentences for the lies spilling out of Brandon's shaking mouth. Mason's breathing hitched. Tyler nearly dropped his second phone. Brandon stammered, "Wait, no. Delete that, stop, don't." But it was too late. Officer Grant stepped forward, eyes widening at the sheer number of screens pointed at him. "Everyone," Grant said firmly. "Send those to me." Immediately, Brandon looked like he was about to be sick. Marcus folded his arms, his jaw set like stone. "You were saying," he murmured, "that she fell on her own?" Brandon's mouth opened and closed without sound, like a drowning man gasping for air. And as the first video began to autoplay, showing Brandon's hand clamping onto Ariel's ankle, the last sliver of his lie shattered in full view of an entire school. In seconds, the officer's phone would start vibrating non-stop, with incoming evidence clear, irrefutable, damning, setting the stage for what came next. Ridgewood's golden boy, Finally facing the truth he could no longer outrun. The cafeteria felt brighter, somehow like the overhead lights had sharpened into interrogation lamps aimed directly at Brandon and his cronies. Students who minutes earlier had pretended not to see anything were suddenly stepping forward, hands raised high, phones glowing with damning proof. It started with one student, then 3, then a dozen. Soon, nearly an entire half-circle of phones surrounded Officer Grant. Each screen paused on the same sickening moment. Brandon's fist clenched around Ariel's ankle, dragging her across the floor as her hands clawed helplessly at the tile. A girl near the front held up her phone with trembling fingers. I recorded the whole thing," she said. "All of it, from when he pushed her chair." Another student chimed in, voice shaky but firm. "Here's my angle shows Mason mocking her." "And mine," a tall junior added. "Tyler shoved her wheelchair here, see?" The cafeteria buzzed with a low hum of shame, fear, and realization, like a collective awakening they wished they didn't have to witness. Officer Grant's face stiffened as he took phone after phone, airdropping file after file to his device. Every clip told the same story. Every angle sealed the same fate, and Brandon Cole was at the center of all of them. Marcus stood silent, arms crossed, jaw locked tight. It wasn't the silence of someone unsure. It was the silence of a man waiting for the world to catch up to a truth he already knew. Grant opened the first video. The cafeteria fell still, watching Brandon on-screen yank Ariel's ankle with a wide, gleeful smile plastered across his face as she screamed, "Please stop," she cried in the video, her voice cracking with panic. Mason's imitation of her limp drew laughter in the background. Tyler zoomed in on her face like he was documenting a zoo exhibit. Then, the moment the wheelchair was torn away from her, brutal, swift, merciless. The real Brandon flinched watching the version of himself on the screen. His face turned pale, his jaw clenched and unclenched, as if he could grind the evidence into dust by sheer will. Tyler muttered, "Dude, this looks bad." Mason elbowed him hard. "Shut up." Officer Grant swiped to the next video. And the next. And the next. No matter which clip he opened, the results were the same. Brandon dragging Ariel. Mason mocking her disability. Tyler shoving her chair. Dozens of students watching. No one stepping in. The evidence was overwhelming, like a tidal wave crashing onto Brandon's flimsy excuses. Grant finally exhaled and turned to face the boy. "All right," he said, voice heavy with disgust. "Explain this. Please. I'd love to hear your version." Brandon swallowed hard. It's not these angles are weird. She fell first, and Marcus cut him off with a cold stare. Officer Grant raised an eyebrow and held up his phone so Brandon could see the clearest shot. A close-up of his hand locked around Ariel's leg as she screamed for help. "This," Grant said, voice razor-sharp, "is what you call her falling?" A ripple of gasps cut through the crowd. Brandon opened his mouth, but nothing came out except a strangled choke. His eyes darted to Mason, to Tyler, to the students around him, as if anyone might save him. But no one did, not this time. Mason looked sick, Tyler looked ready to faint, and Brandon looked like a tower finally realizing its foundation was nothing but sand. Officer Grant let the silence stretch, a silence that screamed louder than any accusation. Then he said the line that sealed Brandon's fate. "This is assault." Clear as day. The cafeteria erupted into whispers, shocked, electrified, irreversible. Marcus's arms remained crossed, but his eyes gleamed with lethal satisfaction. His daughter was still trembling beside him, and the boy who hurt her, who humiliated her publicly, had just run out of lies to hide behind. Officer Grant stepped closer to Brandon and showed him the video one more time. "Still want to claim she fell on her own?" he asked, his voice low with controlled fury. Brandon's lips trembled. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Before anyone could speak again, Grant's radio crackled, and a message came through, confirming something that made Brandon's knees buckle. His disciplinary file had just been pulled up, and what was in it would turn the entire cafeteria upside down. The atmosphere in the cafeteria had shifted from horror to tension to something new. Anticipation. 200 students stood frozen, breath shallow, waiting for the next blow to fall on Ridgewood's golden boy. Special Agent Marcus Johnson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply turned to Officer Grant and said, with calm, lethal clarity, "Check his record." A hush fell instantly. Brandon stiffened. Grant blinked. "His disciplinary file?" "Everything," Marcus said. "School history, prior complaints, transfers." It wasn't a request. It was a federal-level command wrapped in a father's fury. Officer Grant swallowed hard and tapped rapidly on his tablet, opening the district's secure student database. Normally, records took time to load layers of permissions, multiple screens. Not today. Grant's hands were shaking. He typed faster. Brandon stepped forward, voice cracking. "You don't have the right." Marcus shot him a look that shut him up instantly. Students crowded closer, whispering violently. "What if he actually has something?" "No way, Brandon. He's the golden boy. Identical. He's on every poster in the gym, dude. His dad funds half the school." Tyler tugged Brandon's sleeve. "Tell them to stop. Tell them do something." But Brandon's face had already lost its confident mask. His eyes darted from the tablet to Marcus, then to the exits, calculating, panicking. Officer Grant finally hit the last confirmation button. A soft ding echoed across the silent cafeteria. The file loaded. Grant's expression darkened so fast, it sent a chill through the room. Oh hell," he murmured. "What?" Marcus asked sharply. Grant turned the tablet so only Marcus could see. The agent leaned in, eyes narrowing as he scanned the lines one after another. Each sentence made his jaw clench harder. Asterisk, asterisk. Suspension, junior high. Violence toward a disabled student. Parent complaint filed but retracted. Transfer recommended after repeated bullying complaints. Recorded incident. Physical assault resulting in hospitalization. Sealed at parent request. Recommendation for referral to juvenile court. Blocked by family influence. Behavioral risk flagged twice by school counselors. Marcus straightened slowly. His silence was colder than anger, more dangerous than shouting. Grant looked up, pale. "This kid should have been in court years ago." A loud murmur rippled through the students. "What? No freaking way. That can't be real. He assaulted someone before? He almost went to juvie?" Brandon's panic erupted. "That file is wrong. It's my dad," he fixed. He stopped himself too late. The entire room inhaled sharply. Officer Grant raised an eyebrow. "He fixed what, Brandon?" Brandon's mouth hung open. Marcus took a step forward, the kind of step that made even Mason and Tyler retreat like frightened animals. "So this wasn't your first time hurting someone weaker than you," Marcus said quietly. "Just the first time you got caught publicly," students whispered violently. "Dude, he lied to everyone. I thought he was just a jerk. But this? He assaulted people at his old school?" Brandon shook his head wildly. No, it's complicated. They were lying. My dad handled it." "That's the problem," Marcus said, voice dripping with controlled fury. "Your father handled everything except raising you." A few students gasped aloud. Officer Grant turned the tablet to the crowd for a full, damning moment. Brandon lunged forward to grab it. "Don't!" he shouted. Grant yanked it out of reach. "Touch me again, and you'll be in cuffs faster than you can blink." Brandon froze, chest heaving. Mason whispered, terrified, "Dude, we're done. We're actually done." Tyler was trembling uncontrollably. The cafeteria was buzzing with disbelief, disgust, and something else Marcus had been waiting for: accountability. Grant glared at Brandon. "You had a history of violence. A record of harming disabled students. You should have been monitored from day one," Brandon snapped, voice cracking under the pressure. "Shut up. You don't know anything. You can't." He didn't finish. Because that's when he noticed something. Not Marcus, not the students, not even Ariel's trembling form. He noticed the door, wide open, unblocked, unprotected. His eyes flashed with desperate calculation. Run. It was the only word left in his mind. Without warning, Brandon bolted. He shoved past Mason, past Tyler, barreling toward the exit like a trapped animal trying to escape the cage closing in around him. Students screamed and jumped out of the way. A chair toppled. A tray crashed to the floor. Officer Grant cursed. "Stop!" Marcus turned, eyes narrowing, stance shifting, instincts kicking in. Brandon sprinted toward the hall. The cafeteria erupted as Brandon made a break for it, proof, panic, and guilt chasing him harder than any punishment ever had. But he didn't get far. His escape would end faster and harder than he ever expected. Brandon's shoes slapped against the tile as he tore out of the cafeteria, his breath coming in frantic bursts. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The humiliation, the exposed past, the evidence flashing on every student's phone, it all closed in on him like a collapsing tunnel. He sprinted into the main hallway, arms pumping wildly, eyes darting in panic. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear the screams that followed him from the cafeteria. "Hey, stop! He's running!" Oh my God, he's actually running. Behind him, Officer Grant launched forward, radio bouncing at his hip, shouting Brandon's name. His footsteps thundered across the tile, but the sound that truly broke Brandon's spirit, the one that made him run even faster and more desperately, was the heavy, controlled stride of Marcus Johnson. Marcus wasn't sprinting. He didn't need to. He moved like a man who had hunted people far more dangerous than a spoiled bully. His long steps were powerful and relentless, closing distance without wasted motion. Brandon glanced back and saw him, the FBI letters blazing across Marcus's jacket, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on him with cold, terrifying focus. Brandon's lungs seized with panic. He rounded the corner toward the front entrance, nearly slipping as he turned too fast. His shoulder slammed into a locker. A stabbing pain shot down his arm, but he pushed forward. He needed out. Out of the school. Out of this nightmare. If he reached the doors, maybe somehow he could thud. His foot hit a patch of spilled juice near the entrance, an orange slick on the floor he hadn't even noticed. His legs shot forward. His arms flailed. His body lifted off the ground in a graceless arc. He crashed down hard. His back hit first, then his elbow. Then the back of his skull smacked the tile with a resonance that echoed down the hall. He groaned, dazed, eyes blinking rapidly as pain radiated through his spine. Before he could recover, before he could roll over or crawl away, a shadow fell across him. Officer Grant skidded to a stop beside him, one knee slamming into the ground, hand already on his cuffs. "Brandon Cole," Grant panted, breathless but firm. "You're under arrest for assault and battery." Brandon thrashed weakly. No, get off me, let me." Grant shoved his arm behind his back. The metallic click-clack of the cuffs echoed like a hammer striking steel, and then the hallway erupted. Because a flood of students had spilled out of the cafeteria doors, filling the hall, forming a semicircle around the scene. Hundreds of phones rose into the air as Brandon lay pinned, wrists locked behind him, cheek pressed to the cold tile. Gasps, whispers, shocked murmurs spreading like wildfire. "That's Brandon. He really got arrested. No way this is happening. He's done." Marcus reached the scene last, but when he did, everyone stepped back to give him space. He didn't touch Brandon. He didn't need to. He simply stood over him, breathing hard, fists clenched, the look of a father who had seen enough, far more than enough. Brandon looked up at Marcus from the floor, eyes wide with pure fear. Marcus didn't say a word. He didn't have to. With hundreds of students watching, Officer Grant hauled Brandon to his feet, wrists cuffed tight, and marched him down the hallway, every step a public, irreversible humiliation for Ridgewood's golden boy. But while Brandon's downfall echoed through the school, another storm was brewing, one aimed directly at the adults who let this happen. The institution itself was about to stand trial. The atmosphere inside Principal Hale's office was thick enough to choke on. The blinds were drawn, the fluorescent lights hummed low, and the room felt colder than the rest of the school, like the air itself knew something was about to crack. Special Agent Marcus Johnson stood at the center of the room, posture straight, fury simmering beneath a calm exterior. Across the desk sat Principal Leonard Hale, sweating through his collar, and beside him, trembling so violently her chair creaked, was Miss Riley Watson, the teacher who watched Ariel suffer and did nothing. On the desk, Hale's computer screen displayed the cafeteria's security footage, paused at the moment Ariel lay helpless on the floor. The video window was surrounded by timestamps, red markers, and a clear record of Riley Watson sitting at her desk, eyes flicking toward the chaos, then deliberately turning away. Marcus pressed play. The room filled with Ariel's screams echoing through tinny speakers. Riley flinched with every sound, every cry she had ignored. Marcus didn't look at her. Not yet. He watched the video again, jaw flexing as it showed her turn her head, look directly at Brandon dragging his daughter, and then open her laptop. Pretending to work, pretending not to see. When the clip ended, the room fell into a suffocating silence. Principal Hale cleared his throat weakly. Agent Johnson. I'm sure Miss Watson simply misjudged the situation. I'm sure she didn't enough, Marcus said quietly. The word hit like a slammed fist. Riley's eyes welled up. I didn't know what to do. Marcus slowly turned his gaze to her, and the weight of it nearly crushed her. You didn't know what to do? He repeated, voice dangerously soft. A child was screaming for help. My child. Riley wiped her tears with shaking hands. I was scared. Of what? Her voice cracked. Of the Cole family. They have influence. They've gotten teachers fired before. They've stopped. Marcus stepped closer. Hale swallowed hard but didn't intervene. He couldn't. Not with what they'd just watched. Riley's voice trembled. I was afraid if I got involved, Brandon's parents would come after me. They've done it before. They ruin people. Marcus slammed a thick folder onto the desk. Both Riley and Hale jumped. Them? Marcus hissed. You were afraid of them? He stabbed a finger toward the screen, showing Ariel's terrified face frozen mid-scream. But my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, was the one who had to suffer so you could protect yourself? Riley burst into tears. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean… You didn't mean? Marcus snapped, voice rising for the first time. You didn't mean to let a disabled child get assaulted in front of you? You didn't mean to sit there while she was dragged across the floor like garbage? Hale shifted uncomfortably. Agent Johnson, I assure you, there will be consequences. We'll conduct an internal review. Marcus turned on him. No, he said bluntly. You will not handle this internally. Hale blinked. Sir? Marcus leaned forward, planting his hands on the desk. This school failed my daughter. Your staff failed my daughter. And your policies enabled a boy with a violent history to walk these halls without supervision. Hale's mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus straightened, his voice dropping to a cold, lethal calm. I have already reported this to the Department of Education, and I will personally ensure that the full investigation begins today. Riley paled to the point of ghostly white. Hale's face crumpled in horror. Marcus tapped the folder once, eyes burning through both of them. You were afraid of Brandon, he said quietly, but it was Ariel who paid the price, and that ends now. It's such as equestrially way. And with a single call placed from Marcus's phone moments later, Ridgewood High officially became the center of a state-level investigation, one that would expose far more rot than anyone expected. The Ridgewood High auditorium hadn't been this full in years. Every seat was packed, teachers stiff and anxious, students whispering in electrified clusters, and parents sitting with arms crossed, expressions tense and watchful. The air buzzed with unease, thick with the weight of consequences the school had never dared to enforce. On stage, the entire administrative board sat in a rigid line. Principal Hale looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. Beside him were 2 district officials and the school's legal counsel, all preparing to address the fallout of Ariel's assault. And standing near the aisle, arms crossed, gaze hard as stone, Special Agent Marcus Johnson. People weren't murmuring about Brandon anymore. They were murmuring about him, the father who stormed in, the agent who exposed everything. the man who had single-handedly forced Ridgewood High to confront years of ignored abuse. A microphone screeched as Hale stepped forward. We called this emergency assembly to address the findings of the Department of Education's preliminary review, he began, voice shaking. Effective immediately, several staff members have been placed under investigation for neglecting student safety. Gasps spread through the room. The names were read aloud. Miss Riley Watson, Mr. Feldman, Coach Jacobs, Assistant Principal Keene. One by one, educators stood, faces burning with humiliation, as whispers rippled across the auditorium. Some students muttered that they deserved it. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Realizing how deep the culture of silence truly ran, the district representative continued, voice firm. Furthermore, the students directly involved in the assault Brandon Cole, Mason Reed, and Tyler Knox are suspended indefinitely pending legal review. A stunned hush swept the room. Then, an eruption. Parents shot to their feet. "This is insane!" one mother shouted. "Brandon is a good kid." "You can't ruin their futures over one mistake," yelled another. "My son's college prospects, do you understand what you've done?" The auditorium throbbed with rising anger. Fueled by privilege and denial, Marcus didn't move. He watched the chaos unfold with a controlled, simmering fury. These were the same parents who had allowed their children to terrorize others who had bought silence, pressured staff, and shielded their kids from consequences. And now, they dared to cry unfair? A father pointed angrily toward the stage. Why should the entire school suffer because one girl? He didn't finish. Because Marcus stood. The room went dead silent. Every eye snapped to him. Every voice died in an instant. He walked to the center aisle with slow, deliberate steps, the microphone already being passed down by trembling hands until it reached him. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. His words came out low, steady, cutting through the auditorium like a blade. Unfair? The word echoed. He looked directly at the parents who had been yelling the loudest. Your children dragged my daughter, disabled, terrified, and alone across the cafeteria floor while the entire school watched. A murmur of shame trembled through the crowd. And you want to talk about unfair? Marcus demanded. He took one step closer to the stage. My daughter has nightmares now. Bruises, scratches, trauma she didn't deserve. Another step. And you want to stand here and call this unfair? No one breathed. Marcus pointed to the suspended students' empty seats. Fairness, he said, voice now trembling with restrained emotion, would be making them experience even a fraction of what they did to her. Not a soul dared respond. He lowered the microphone, staring directly at the outraged parents. You want to talk about justice? He said coldly. Ask my daughter what justice feels like. The room stayed silent long after Marcus returned to his seat, long enough for the board to announce sweeping reforms. Ridgewood High wouldn't just be punished. It would be rebuilt, starting with a brand new, zero-tolerance anti-bullying policy that would change the school forever. The next Monday morning, Ridgewood High felt different. Not quieter schools were never truly quiet, but softer. Somehow, the edges felt less sharp, the hallways less hostile. The usual undercurrent of gossip had thinned into something hushed and cautious, like the entire building was holding its breath. And at the entrance of the main hallway, rolling forward with slow, steady movements, was Ariel Johnson, returning to school for the first time since the assault. Her father walked beside her, one hand lightly resting on the back of her wheelchair. Marcus wasn't in his FBI jacket today. He wore a simple gray shirt and slacks. But even without the badge, every student who saw him stepped politely out of the way. They weren't afraid of him. They respected him. And they respected the girl beside him even more. As Ariel moved deeper into the hallway, conversations dimmed. Heads turned not with judgment or mockery, but with something she had never seen here before. Acknowledgement, regret, respect. Lockers that once slammed shut to startle her now closed gently. Students who used to stare with cold amusement now looked at her with softened expressions. some nodding in silent apology as she rolled past. A cluster of juniors parted instinctively, giving her a clear path. One of them whispered, "That's her. That's Ariel." Another murmured, "She's stronger than all of us." Ariel's chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warmer, something unfamiliar at Ridgewood. She wasn't used to being seen in any way that wasn't cruel. Marcus leaned down slightly. "You okay?" She nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. "Yeah, I think I am." As they reached her locker, Marcus stepped back a little, giving her space. Students continued to drift down the hall, glancing over with the kind of cautious respect usually reserved for survivors. Because that's what she was now, not a target, not a joke, but someone who had survived what most of them couldn't even imagine. Then, a soft voice called from behind her. Ariel?" She turned to see a girl her age, nervous, wringing her hands, eyes flicking between Ariel and the floor. It was Harper Lee, a sophomore known for keeping to herself, the same girl who had filmed one of the clearest videos of the attack. Harper approached slowly. "Hi, I wanted to talk to you, if that's okay." Ariel gave a gentle nod. "It's okay," Harper exhaled shakily. I'm sorry. About everything. I recorded what happened, but I didn't help you. I should have stepped in, I should have tried. I just froze, and I feel awful." Ariel studied the girl's trembling hands, her guilt-widened eyes. Normally, she would have shrunk under this attention, but today something was different. She felt stronger, more grounded. She reached out and lightly touched Harper's wrist. "It's okay," Ariel said softly. "Your video helped them see the truth. It saved me." Harper's breath hitched. "Still, I'm sorry." Ariel's smile was small, tired, but real. "Thank you for saying that." Behind them, Marcus watched with a mixture of pride and relief. This wasn't the ending he imagined for his daughter. It was better because it was hers. Harper stepped back, wiping her eyes. Students who had been watching nodded at Ariel respectfully before continuing down the hall. The atmosphere felt different, lighter, safer, like the school had finally opened its eyes. As Ariel rolled toward her first class, her voice barely above a whisper, she said to her father, "I think things are changing." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Because you made them change." End quote. Ariel took a steady breath and smiled, truly smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you for standing by me," she whispered. "Now, I can stand for myself." The end of her story was close, one final confrontation with the past still waiting, and a future ready to begin. The juvenile courtroom was small, but today it felt like the center of the world. Wood-paneled walls, muted lighting, and a thick, tense silence hung over every seat. Parents, school officials, and a few students sat scattered across the benches, whispering among themselves. At the front sat Brandon Cole, hands clasped, shoulders tense. The swagger he once carried evaporated. His parents flanked him, the father stiff and stone-faced, the mother desperately smoothing the wrinkles of her skirt as if she could iron out her son's reputation with it. Across the aisle, Ariel Johnson sat beside her father. She looked small in her chair, but nothing about her demeanor was weak. Her chin was lifted, her eyes steady, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Marcus sat next to her, posture upright, face unreadable. The judge entered, and the room rose. After the preliminaries, the judge began listing the charges: assault on a disabled minor, harassment, violation of prior behavioral warnings. Each word tightened the tension in the courtroom like a rope pulled taut. Brandon's father leaned in and whispered harshly, "Just keep your head down." But Brandon wasn't listening. His gaze flicked between Ariel and the judge, his breathing uneven, a mixture of fear and fragile hope. The judge set down her papers and looked directly at him. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you have a documented history of targeting vulnerable students. You were given warnings, counseling, interventions, and yet you continued to escalate." Brandon flinched. His parents stiffened. "It is clear," she continued, "that without strict corrective action, you remain a danger to your peers." A hush rippled through the room. "For these reasons, the court sentences you to..." 6 months of community service, mandatory behavioral management classes, weekly counseling sessions, and revocation of all extracurricular privileges for the remainder of the year. Brandon's mother gasped quietly. His father's jaw tightened like someone had punched him. And furthermore, the judge added, "Your family's sponsorship privileges with Ridgewood High are suspended pending review." That hit harder than anything else. The Cole family had always believed money made them untouchable. Just like that, their influence dissolved. A soft murmur rose from the benches. Marcus remained still, expression carved from stone. Brandon swallowed hard. Then, slowly, shakily, he stood. "Your Honor, may I say something?" The judge observed him, then gave a single nod. Brandon turned toward Ariel. His voice trembled not with humility, but with fear and shame. "Ariel," he swallowed again, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have. I didn't understand how badly I was hurting you." For a moment, the room held its breath. Even Marcus watched his daughter, giving her full control of this moment. Ariel looked at Brandon not with hatred, not with satisfaction, but with a sadness deeper than anything the courtroom could hold. She lifted her chin. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a bell. "I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I just want to make sure no one else goes through what I did." A heavy silence fell. A silence loaded with truth. A silence that stripped every excuse, every privilege, every lie Brandon ever hid behind. Even the judge paused, moved by her words. Brandon lowered his eyes, chest heaving, defeated not because of the sentence, but because of the grace he didn't deserve. For a long moment, no one spoke. The stillness was thick, an entire courtroom absorbing the weight of a girl who had endured cruelty and still chose strength over hate. The verdict was final, the consequences set. All that remained was the closing of Ariel's story, a story not of victimhood, but of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of standing tall after being dragged down. The final bell of the day echoed across Ridgewood High, and the campus glowed beneath the soft, golden haze of late afternoon. Students gathered on the wide lawn near the flagpole, forming a half-circle of anticipation and quiet murmurs. Today wasn't a pep rally. It wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. A moment of reflection. A moment the school had never seen before. At the small wooden podium stood Ariel Johnson, her wheelchair positioned beneath the warm sunlight. The golden light pooled around her like a spotlight, turning her curls into bronze and illuminating the calm determination in her eyes. Behind her stood Marcus Johnson, hands clasped behind his back, gaze proud, protective, and steady. He wasn't here as an agent. He wasn't here as the man who shook the cafeteria to its core. He was here simply as her father, and scattered across the lawn, hundreds of students, freshmen to seniors, waited in silence. Some were nervous, some emotional, some humbled, but all of them were listening. Principal Hale stepped aside, giving Ariel the floor. She drew a slow breath. The microphone trembled slightly under her fingers, but her voice, when it came, was strong. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "This isn't easy for me. A few weeks ago, I felt invisible, and then suddenly, I wasn't invisible at all. I was on the floor of the cafeteria, being dragged in front of everyone. A ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd. Heads dropped, some hands clenched. Students who had watched in silence that day felt the sting of guilt return." Ariel inhaled shakily, but continued. "I remember the cold tile on my cheek," she said. "I remember the sound of people laughing. I remember wishing anyone would help." Her voice wavered. Marcus stepped half an inch closer, but didn't touch her. She steadied herself. "But I also remember something else. I remember the moment the doors flew open, and my dad walked in." Several students nodded. They remembered too. The moment the school shifted, the moment the fear shifted. "That moment," Ariel said softly, "was the moment I realized I wasn't alone. Even when it felt like the whole school turned away, someone was coming for me." A hush settled over the lawn. No one dared blink. "And now," she continued, I'm standing here because the school wants to talk about courage specifically, the courage of victims. She looked down for a second, gathering herself. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about surviving fear. It's about speaking up even when your voice shakes. It's about knowing you deserve better, even when people treat you like you don't. A girl in the back wiped her eyes. A boy near the front swallowed hard. Ariel continued, stronger now. What happened to me was wrong, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. That's why we have to stop pretending that silence keeps us safe. Silence protects bullies. It doesn't protect us. She lifted her chin, looking directly into the crowd. Don't ever stay silent in the face of injustice. 1 minute of your silence could be a lifetime of someone else's pain. The words hit with the force of a tidal wave. Students looked at each other as if hearing their shame echo back at them. Ariel closed her speech with a small, brave smile. Thank you for listening, for learning, and for choosing to be better. The crowd erupted not with cheers, but with long, heartfelt applause that washed over her like a warm wave. Some students stepped forward, waiting to speak with her. Others hung back, absorbing the moment. Marcus moved to her side, placing a gentle hand on the back of her chair. You were incredible, he murmured. Ariel smiled up at him. Because you showed me I could be. As the sun dipped lower, father and daughter rolled forward through the crowd, students parting respectfully, watching them with admiration instead of cruelty. Ariel and Marcus walked one step, one wheel at a time across the golden-lit lawn. Their silhouettes stretched behind them like long shadows of strength and justice. Hand in hand, they left the campus, carrying a message that would echo long after they were gone. Courage can be quiet, but it changes everything. And that's how a terrified, disabled black girl went from being dragged across a cafeteria floor to standing taller than every person who tried to break her. Justice didn't just show up, it kicked the doors open, wearing an FBI jacket and the fury of a father who refused to let silence win. Ariel didn't just survive. She changed her entire school, exposed corruption, and proved that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the world trembles anyway. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in that cafeteria, what would you have done? If this story hit you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that deserve to be heard.